I'm just giving this to you for now, but I'm going to reference this tonight, just so you know what I'm talking about. I could send it to you, soft copy too.
I know what you're talking about.
I know, but just, I
You
didn't
want
want,
it to be a reference?
I have it.
Okay.
You can throw it out. There you go. Good man. All kinds of freaking papers. Papers. Take this with me. Nick, let us know when you're ready.
I think we're ready if you all are.
Do you need a sound check or we're good to go?
We should be good to go. We did a big, heavy, in-depth check before the orchestra.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
All right. Ready?
I'm all set. Very good.
All right. Here we go.
Very good. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. Sorry, everybody, for the delay. We had an orchestra in here that ran slightly over, and then we had to reset up, but they sounded phenomenal. All holiday music, and it was the 7th and 8th graders. I thought it was the AP class, but then Ms. Bass told us it was the middle schoolers, which was really amazing. So we're going to get right to it. We have an action-packed agenda, so just bear with us. It might be a slightly lengthy meeting. So real quick on the housekeeping, open public meeting statement. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend any meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this law, this act, the School District of Chatham of the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Borough, Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the TAP. Mr. DeQuilla, do you mind taking attendance?
Ms. Chigarelli?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Mr. D'Alessandro?
Here.
Ms. Kenny? Ms. Ross?
Here.
Mr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Smith?
Here.
Dr. Zhang?
Here.
And Ms. Weber?
Here.
8 present and accounted for.
Excellent. If you're able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. We may have to use an imaginary flag, so just pretend. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry about that. It's usually over there. Okay. Again, I mentioned we have an action-packed agenda, so I'm going to skip President's comments right now, and I will incorporate them into the Borough liaison portion of the meeting. So without further ado, Dr. LaSusa, I'm going to send it right over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. And that was the strings part of the strings orchestra from Chatham Middle School, grades 7 and 8 students. All of the concerts for the orchestra at CMS will take place Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m., so anyone from the community can watch them. And then we have the second annual Night of Music happening on Thursday. This was something that started last year, where we had various musical groups and student ensembles throughout the town around Main Street. And they will be performing in 3 different locations Thursday night. I forget which 3 places she told me, but they're all stores up on Main Street. So that's Miss Suzanne Bass and 7th and 8th grade students, and they did a terrific job. The first item on my agenda or under my report is the demographic report. Just some background, we had a demographic study conducted about 5 years ago, pre-pandemic obviously. As we were coming out of the pandemic, the board undertook an additional new demographic study to freshen up the numbers, see where we were, and Dr. Richard Grip has completed his report, and now will give a public presentation of what he submitted to the board a month or so ago in writing in terms of the written report that he gave us. So I invite him to the microphone. We can all go down into the audience, and then we'll come back up.
Thank you, Dr. LaSousa. It's great to be back. It's been 4 years. October 2018, according to my record, so it's always good to be back. And what a magnificent auditorium. Just blown away. All right, while you make your seats, just in the essence of time, I'm just going to go forward into the introduction, which really is just about our company and myself. So this firm I founded 25 years ago almost. It'll be this coming March, will be 25 years. And the firm basically just does school demographic services for school districts in New York, New Jersey metropolitan area mostly. Just by show of hands of board members, who heard me 4 years ago, just out of curiosity? Okay, it's about 5 or 6 of you, thank you. Our company has expanded to not just the New York, New Jersey metro area. We go all the way down to DC, up towards Vermont, and the New England corridor. We've probably done about 200 school districts in New York, New Jersey metro area. And our firm is the consultant for the New York City Public Schools since 2006, the largest school district in the country. I'm the executive director of the company. I have a doctorate in Ed Stats and Measurement from Rutgers University. My dissertation was in this same field in something called school demography, where I was projecting enrollments using multiple regression techniques. I still love to publish in this field. This is my passion. Numerous peer-reviewed journal articles still, and I present nationally. And I've testified as an expert witness in school demography in several administrative law hearings around the state. And that's when school districts want to divorce from each other, when there's a sending-receiving agreement from one district to another. So real brief, this is the purpose of the study. Now tonight, I'm going to try to keep this moving as quick as I can, about 20 minutes if you can bear with me, and we'll have questions at the end. But the report itself is almost 100 pages, so I'm trying to do due diligence and give it its due time to go over most of the report. So when we do a demographic study, everyone thinks of projecting enrollments, and that's pretty much what a lot of people think it is, but it's way more than that. We projected enrollments for a 5-year period beginning with the 22-23 school year, which is now, through the 26-27 school year. And as I mentioned earlier tonight, the first study was done for your district back in May of 2018. So I look at different things, such as the community population trends in both the borough and the township, racial characteristics, age structure, birth counts, fertility rates, things like that. Then, moving away from the communities, we go down to the school district level, and we look at historical enrollments over time, not only district-wide, but by grade configuration and by school. In this particular study, we computed what's called student yields, which are children per housing unit, and that was done by different housing type, such as detached single-family homes, townhouses, condos, and apartments. In case we have new developments in a community, we want to estimate how many children we can expect. That's the purpose of that. We compared the building capacities of what you have currently to the current and projected enrollments to see if you have surplus seating or shortage of seating. We looked at historical BERTs by elementary attendance area. I'll talk more about that later. We contacted each municipality's planning and zoning department to find out about new housing developments. And finally, the last thing, in a completely independent analysis, we projected enrollments based on housing turnover rates of the houses in each community based on historical turnover patterns. So this is just a diagram showing the borough and townships population over time. The borough's population is, in 2020, about 9,200 folks, which is right, if I can get the pointer to go, maybe it's not that easy for me to see that, but it's, as you can see in the vertical line separates the historical populations to your left and the projected populations from an agency called the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, a third-party agency. So basically you can see that the borough's population is a little bit underneath that of the township, but you're looking at somewhere around 21,000 people combined of the two communities. So if we look at the demographic profile of each, they're fairly similar communities. And I work with a lot of school districts, and I can't say that about everybody. Your two communities are very, very similar. You can see the racial distribution up there in 2020 from the census. A little more than 3/4 white. The only difference is the township has a bigger Asian population, where the borough has a slightly bigger Hispanic population, but to me they're fairly similar. When we look at the racial breakdown between 2010 census to now, there's a declining white population in both communities, and that is common across the state and pretty much across the country. Foreign-born population, about 14-15% in each community, which is less than that of the state. The two main countries where foreign-born sources are from China and India. These are two of the most highly educated communities I've worked with in my 25 years. Bachelor's degree or higher is 79% in the borough and 81% in the township. You can see that's double that of the state. Take a look at the median household income. That means 50% of households have an income greater than $202,000 and 50% have less than that. And that's the same income in both communities, which is more than double that of the state. The main type of home in each community is a single-family detached or attached, which would be like a townhome or a condo in each community. You can see of 82% in the borough and 78% in the township. And then renter-occupied, not too many, less than 20% in each community, where the state average is about 36%. And the median value of an owner-occupied unit is more than $800,000 in the borough and more than around $928,000 in the township. So it gives you an idea about your communities. And you can see here we constructed a map showing the borough on the right and the township on the left, and all the schools are up there on the map. The next slide is actually showing the elementary attendance areas, and you can see there's a big hole out on the chunk that's been taken out on the western side of the township, and that's from the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge. But you can see the 3 elementary schools of the PK to 3 variety, and for the one school, you can see that their attendance boundary is a little further away from where the school is, way out in the northwest corner of the township. So just looking at the historical enrollments of the district over time. So the last year, since this was done over the summer, the last enrollment year that we had historically was the 2021-22 school year. And the school district's enrollments are given to the state every year at the same date, roughly around October 15th. So the district's enrollment as of last October was around 3,732 students. And pattern-wise, the enrollments slowly increased over the last 10 years. We looked at the 10-year historical trends. The enrollments increased through the 16-17 year before they reversed trend. And they have declined annually for the last 5 years. When I came here 4 years ago, there had been a period of big enrollment increases in the school district, and I was projecting an enrollment decline, and that has happened in the last 4 years. What I couldn't project 4 years ago was that we were going to have a pandemic. And in the 2020 and 21 school year alone, those 2 years combined, there was a loss of 309 students in the district. The enrollment 10 years ago was about 4,100 students. So if we look at that enrollment then to now, that's a loss of 378. And again, most of that is during the pandemic years. And we'll talk more about COVID and how that's impacted enrollment projections and people's living patterns, migration patterns a little later on. So we projected enrollments using something called the cohort survival ratio method, which I'll talk about in a moment. There's your enrollment over time. You can see on the far right part of the screen, the bar is showing that more steeper decline in just the last couple years. But when we look at the enrollments for the K to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 8, and 9 to 12, what's really interesting is, and if you stay awake for one slide all night, this is the one I want you to stay awake for. The PK to 3 is the one in blue. And you can see that if you look at it over the last 10 years, that's been steadily declining. And logic would have it that because you have declining enrollment at that level, as those students, the smaller cohorts, move up to the upper level grades, they're going to start to decline as well. So if you look at the 4 to 5 line, which is in green, that started to decline in the last 4 to 5 years. That's at Lafayette. And the middle school has also started to decline in the last 5 years. And the high school, which had been increasing for the longest time, which is in red, is just starting to decline in the last 2 years. It's a snowball effect, and it takes on, of course, it's going to move through and affect the 4 to 5 school first, followed by 6 to 8 and 9 to 12. So keep that in mind as we talk about the projections. So when we project enrollment, this methodology, which was something that's improved by the New Jersey Department of Ed, we actually compute what's called a survival rate or a progression rate of one grade to the next over time, and we do it for about a 10-year period. And I just have a simple example up there if you just follow along. If you have 100 first graders in the 2020 year and it becomes 95 second graders the next year, so you've lost a net of 5 students. The survival ratio or grade progression is 95 over 100, or 0.95. We do this grade progression from birth to kindergarten, which is a 5-year period, all the way up through 11 through 12. There's 13 possible grade progressions. And if the values are above 1, you have inward migration. If the values are below 1, you have net outward migration. So when we looked at your 13 ratios and looked at them in the average, usually a 5-year average, 8 of them were below 1. So you have slight net outward migration occurring in the district, and the values that were below 1 mostly were at the middle and the high school levels, which tells me usually that people are starting here and they might pull out their kids for private high school or maybe in private middle school a little bit later on. In the 2020 year, which was the first year of the pandemic, you had 3 survival ratios were the lowest in the last decade. So when we do the projections, we had to go around those numbers, throw them out, because we don't, not going to have that kind of impact going forward. So once we compute these average ratios, because we're not going to just use your most current ratio, because that's, you're going to have some anomaly years in there, we take the average ratios and apply it to the most current enrollments, and that will project the enrollments going forward. So we're really assuming that the survival ratios are going to maintain a constant level. You have a phenomenon here called negative first grade replacement, which has happened in the last 6 out of the last 9 years. Negative first grade replacement is when your entering first grade cohort is less than the number of graduating 12th grade students from the prior year. In most districts, we look at the kindergarten instead of the first grade population, but since you have a half-day K program, we look at the first grade. So to balance out your enrollment, if you have 500 graduating seniors, you need 500 first graders to balance out the equation. You're getting less than 500 enter in, which is causing this negative first grade replacement. You did have positive first grade replacement, actually, and it flipped to negative in 17-18. And that's because you have smaller sizes of first grade classes coming in, and the larger 12th grade cohorts are graduating, they're getting bigger from a period of time a long time ago when you did have increasing enrollment in the district. And here's that chart right there showing how it was positive about 10 years ago, but it's getting more negative as we go on here. And when we look at the relationship between your first grade replacement and enrollment change, which is in blue, enrollment change is just the change in enrollment from one year to the next. You can see there's a good relationship, a strong correlation between the first grade replacement and what happens in terms of the overall enrollment change in the district. So BERTs. BERTs are a key figure in our projections to project kindergarten counts 5 years later. I looked at the birth counts for both communities. When we aggregate them, they're really declining through the 2014 year before they begin to stabilize. But when you look at the period of time from 2007 to 2020, there were 272 births total in 2007 and only 156 in 2020. That's 116 fewer births, and that's a lot of fewer kids that are going to be entering into the school district. As a result, you can see here's the kindergarten enrollment has declined from 264 in the 2012 year to 179 in 2021. And if we look at the first grade enrollment, you can see it's the same kind of decline. So a district, it's always really interesting for me to take a look at the BERTs, which are the columns over on the left there. That's the BERTs from each, the borough, the township, and the total aggregated. How many students show up 5 years later as kindergarten students? And then on the far right, how many students actually show up as first grade students 6 years later? And because when you have a half-day kindergarten, as you know, some parents choose to send their kids to a private school for kindergarten before enrolling them in the public school district for first grade. So usually, when you have a half-day K, the values for birth to kindergarten, the survival ratio, which is the middle columns there, they're typically below 1. But yours are well above 1, and I know the answer to that. I mean, you have a phenomenal, phenomenal school district, and people want to do anything, move here to get their kids in here. So even though you have a half-day K, the values are well above 1, and take a look at the values from birth to first grade, even more well above 1. So again, testament to your school district. People want to be have their kids here. So this is showing the BERTs over time, and you can see that the BERTs in the borough particularly are the ones that really declined back in the late 2000s. But in general, it declined through about 2014 before stabilizing. We were fortunate to get BERTs from the Department of Health at what's called the census block level, and then my GIS analyst, he took the BERTs in those small census blocks, which are the smallest geographic area possible, and he aggregated them according to your 3 elementary schools, which are up there on the table. The unknown column means that we know that there is a woman who, from the borough or the township, that had a birth that year, but we didn't know exactly where she lived, so we couldn't assign which school the BERTs would go. But you can see that the number of BERTs back in 2007 really they're fairly consistent between 80 and 90 per attendance area, but look all the way down to 2020. You're talking really upper 40s to low 50s, mid 50s for each of the attendance areas. So if we do a subtraction of the BERTs over time from 2020 to 2007, you can see in red there the declines in each one of the attendance areas, which of course is part of the problem with causes declining enrollment. So he also made this map showing in dark blue where the greatest number of BERTs are in 2007. In red up there are the attendance boundaries of the 3 elementary schools, and we fast forward to 2020. You can see how the dark blue's kind of gone away, and it's the same scale. So it's just showing declining BERTs in much of the borough and the township. And then when we aggregate the BERTs over time for that whole entire period, the greatest number of BERTs are down in the Southern Boulevard area. So when we look at your age pyramid, which is Demography 101, it's really a graph of males and females age distribution. This is from 2010. So this is for Chatham Borough. So males are in orange and females are in green. And you can see on the far left, we are plotting the percentage of people in each of the age categories, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, so on and so forth. The borough, back in 2010, the largest groups were way down at the bottom, the 5 to 9 age group, which would be first to about kindergarten to 4th grade. That's when you started to have that big bulge in the system a while ago. And that's for both males and females. If we advance it to the 16-20 year, we don't have 2020 census data by age and sex yet, believe it or not. From the census, they're really behind. But the biggest groups in this particular graph are the 10 to 14, as you can see in the males, and the 50 to 54 for females. So that's for the borough. There's not many people in the 20s, as you can see, in early 30s. Why? They probably just can't afford a median home of around $800,000. It's just very difficult probably for a lot of young people to move here. So that's what happens when you have high socioeconomics in communities like this. You have a very large distribution in the 40s and 50s of people of middle age, and not too many people in the 20s and 30s. So we look at the township, it's fairly similar. Their biggest groups in 2010, actually with a 45 to 49 groups, and we advance it almost 10 years. You can see that big green line out there. That's the 45 to 49 population for females. So, as I mentioned earlier, we contact the planning and zoning of each housing, of each borough and the township to find out about new housing developments. You can see in the borough, there are 268 new units that are planned. Some of them are not approved, such as the Post Office Plaza redevelopment, but we did get the most recent information as we could. And then we got the township. We have 140 units. Some of them are there's going to be a development, the former Charlie Brown's restaurant, which will be affordable units, as is the one on Arbor Green. So due to the fact that the borough and the township have a settlement agreement with the Fair Share Housing Center, there's a responsibility for them to build affordable units. So you can see in the housing type for the township, there's affordable apartments, so that's going to contribute to the obligation. If we go back to the borough, there is some affordables in the Ashton development, as well as the Chatham River Road Partners project, which I actually drove past on the way tonight. So this map is showing where those developments are with respect to each of the elementary attendance zones. Our GIS analyst put that one together. So how many students can we project out of these 400 so homes? So what we did is we computed the student yields by housing type. And it's a kind of a complex process where we take all of your student addresses and join them to the borough and township's property database. And to make a long story short, the 1 to 4 family homes, which are mostly detached single family duplex, the average yield was 0.853 children per home. And for a townhouse or condo, it's very small, 0.083, and for an apartment is 0.127. So my estimates, based upon those yields, and we had to make some estimates on bedroom distributions because they were not available for some of the developments, is roughly just under 100 children out of those developments. You may say, well, gosh, that's not really that many for 400-something units, but the reality is it's the type of unit that is being built here. You do not really get too many children from apartments and condos and townhouses. If you were building a lot of detached single-family homes, there would probably be a lot more children. So we did modify the enrollment projections in the affected elementary attendance areas to account for those additional children. This is just showing you, this is in the report, you can go take a look at it. It actually, we did an analysis for every single townhouse development, showing where it was located, its price points, the year it was built, the bedroom distribution. And then we found out how many kids were in each one of those developments. And on the far right is showing you the yield for each one of those developments. So Chatham Court, at I think it's 0.184, is the largest out of all the developments up there. But the overall yield is only 0.083. And we did the same thing for apartments, also tracking down the rent of what people would pay. And you can see that Springbrook at Chatham is the largest at 0.340 on the far right-hand side there. But again, the overall yield very low. So with home sales, a lot of people ask me is, well, you know, if we sell a lot of homes, aren't a lot of families moving into the community? And that is true. Something got a little skewed here when I guess we uploaded this, but there's actually 3 digits. So if you see a 175, it's 175. It looks kind of strange. But for the borough and the township, the same patterns hold true. Lots of home sales up to around 2007, then a big decline between 2008 and 2012 due to the housing market crash and banking crisis, and then a big increase going up. And we looked at those sales for the last 27 years, and you can see sort of the same pattern here for the township. This is where the greatest number of sales are in the school district attendance area in the lower southern part right there in the township. That's for the last 5 years. So now you want to know, well, what about enrollment projections? So we did project for this 5-year period by individual schools. We did 2 sets of projections. One, what we call baseline, assumes that, well, you know, some of these housing developments don't get built, which could happen. And then the other projection is adjusted for housing growth, assuming they all those approved and proposed development gets construction. So it's a what if, like a worst case scenario. If they all get built, what happens? So the baseline projections we're showing an enrollment in 5 years of 3,315, which would be a decline of 417 students. And for the housing growth model, it would be a decline of 302. So even with the new housing, still a decline in enrollment. That's showing the enrollments over time for both the baseline and the adjusted. So we look at it by grade configuration. What we want to see here, and I want to tell you, and it should stand out, is that it's not declining for each grade configuration uniformly. You can see the greatest declines are at the middle school level and at the high school level as these smaller cohorts that are currently in the system move up, move through the grades. PK to 3 is actually showing a increase in enrollment at the end of the 5-year period, which is good. It's showing that finally at the end of the 5 years, you're going to have stabilization of enrollments. Now, if you're thinking like me, and you're thinking 10, 15 years out, what's going to happen? Well, obviously, you probably start to get increases at the middle and high school as these little larger classes start to move through the system, because it's just a process of moving people along. So when we look at enrollments, we then try to compare them to building capacities. Now, the capacities of the buildings are shown in that second column there, and I want to be very clear to you that the capacity of a building is not a hard and fast number. It's a number that is based upon how you are currently using the building. So for instance, if your school board policy has a policy such that all elementary grades in PK to 3 for regular ed only have 20 kids per classroom and you have 20 classrooms, you can multiply it out and get 400 students as your capacity. So it can be changed depending upon board policy. It can also be changed depending upon if you start to use more of the classrooms for for special education, which have less children, or for small group instruction. So those capacity numbers are fluid. Please do not get fixated on them. But it compares the enrollments in both the 21-22 year to the 26-27. And in both situations, you can see that you currently have surplus seating, but as time goes on, take a look at what happens to the middle school particularly. It starts to get a lot of excess seating due to the declining enrollment projected, as well as the high school. Okay, last thing for tonight is the housing turnover analysis, and a completely independent analysis. If you just want to separate the presentation into two and just look at this one section independently, that would be good. We do not use this analysis to project enrollments. If we were doing facility planning, that we would use the cohort survival ratio method, which I showed earlier. We have 3 inputs: housing turnover rates by length of ownership, because what we find out is if a home is owned 10 years, there's a different proportion that sell as opposed to something that's only owned 1 year. You might find that strange, but I'll show you a graph on it in a moment. We also need to know the current distribution of homes by length of ownership, and this is from the aggregated data from both communities. And then we have something called student yields by length of ownership. So what it is we look at turnover rates, and we look at it from about a 27-year period, as much as the data we could get. So we're getting parcel level data, means individual home data, to track each home through its life cycle until it gets sold again and turns back down to 0 years of ownership. So the database that we have from the state has sale dates, sale prices, and the year that the home was built. So a real simple example, since we only have data from 1994 to 2021, we're basically following each year's cohort of homes beginning in the 1994 year to see when they sell. So I give you an example. If you have a home built in 1985 and it has 3 sale years in 95, 98, and 2006. So it's actually part of 3 cohorts. The first length of ownership is not 10 years from 1985 to 1995 because it could have sold in 1988, but we don't have sale dates for those years. So the first length of ownership is 3 years from 1995 to 98. 8 years for the 1998 to 2006 period, and then 15 years from 2006 to 2021, which is the most current year data we had. So remember I said a moment ago, it seems kind of counterintuitive maybe that length of ownership would really have a bearing on the turnover rate. So the left-hand column there is the turnover rate percentage, and on the right is the length of ownership of homes in the borough and the township in years. So notice that homes that are only owned 1 year are the ones that sell with the greatest percentage, up around 6%. But when you get out to about 25 years of ownership, it's only about 1 or 2%. Again, you might think, well, all these empty nesters are selling, or senior citizens. Not quite the case. So this is the distribution of homes by length of ownership right now in the borough and township. Shows you the greatest number are owned 1 year. And this is showing where the students are by length of ownership. The greatest number of students is 1.29 out of, I think it's about 8 years of ownership. You can see it, and then it starts to go down pretty significantly. And that kind of makes sense, because if you think about it, if you own your home and you own it 20 years, eventually your kids are going to graduate from the school district and age out of the system. So you would not expect too many students in homes that are owned 20 or more years. So this is very high, by the way. When I do distributions for other communities, usually it's under 1 as the max for student yields per for a housing unit. So the methodology is somewhat simple. It was developed by some colleagues of mine out in Berkeley. They invented it. I can't take credit for this. You basically take the current length of home ownership distribution, the one I showed you just a moment ago, and the historical turnover rates to either advance the homes to 1 more year of ownership or sell it and have it go back down to 0 years of ownership. Then you take the number of homes at each length of ownership and multiply it by the student yields at each length of ownership, which I just showed you in the previous slide. And what you get is the number of students at each length of ownership. When you sum it up, you get all the students from 1 to 4 family homes, and then you add it to the number of students in condos and apartments and townhouses. We don't consider those. And then there's some other students that we consider as a constant, which are our pre-K population. So this is our first scenario that we looked at, and this is assuming that homes that are very long held, say 27 or 28 years, are going to sell at a rate much, much higher than historically. So in other words, what would happen if all the senior citizens started to sell their homes and the percentage of homes sold at long-held homes was about 5.5%? Well, what would happen is the bottom line there is showing increasing enrollment. You would gain somewhere in the order of about 123 kids. So we did another scenario where, if you follow the lines here, the green line is the average turnover rates. The blue line is the maximum turnover rates, and the one in between is a modified average turnover rate. We expect that in the next model, we don't really think that the homes will sell at the average turnover rate, because it reflects a period of time in the historical period where homes didn't sell as much. So we don't think they'll sell at the maximum rate, but somewhere in between, and that's the purple rate. So it's a constant. It's 125% of the average. And when we did that particular scenario, the enrollments down at the bottom there are practically stable. So what's the upshot of all this? The upshot is that most likely, housing turnover is not going to be the issue that causes enrollment to increase here. Other things, such as housing developments, birth rate changes, are going to be the things that modify your enrollment, but is not going to be housing turnover. COVID, last thing tonight, has been a nightmare for me professionally. It's been personally, of course, for a lot of us as well. It's been the most difficult thing to deal with in terms of trying to figure out people's migration patterns. Where I'm coming from, I didn't mention, but I now live in Vermont, and so I drove down tonight. We've had, after years of we're one of the second biggest brain drain states in the country. You're going to laugh when I tell you this. The whole state has about 83,000 students. And, that's bigger. That's not as many as some of the largest school districts, probably in the state. But so we don't have that many students, but we've had enrollment increases in many towns. You can see some of the big enrollment declines in some of the larger school districts in the country. New York, I didn't put them up there, but they've had very big declining enrollment. Here's the issue. A lot of people left suburbia, large metro areas, to live in their second homes, or they bought a home up there, and the question was, now with remote living, do they really have to come back? And that's the question. Are people going to come back? I think personally, with remote work, we're in a completely different place, and I don't think we're ever going to go back to full, from some jobs for full employment in the office. I don't think that's going to happen. So if you take a look at the USA's population from the beginning of the pandemic, which was April 2020, to about a year and 3 months later, you can see in green, which are the big gainers out in the west, Idaho, Nevada, but the big losers were in the middle of the country, the Rust Belt and the Deep South. Florida was a big gainer. When we look at New Jersey, the big gainer was Ocean County. The biggest decliners was right along the Turnpike border, straight up through, Hudson County, Bergen County. You can see Morris County did gain a little bit, but not that much. So what's the summary tonight? What's the big takeaway? The big takeaway is that enrollments are going to continue to decline. And that's going to continue a trend from the last 5 years where you've had declining enrollment. And the decline would even be greater if not for those impending developments that I spoke about. Thirdly, the enrollment decline is not projected to be uniform across the grade configurations. It's projected to be, the biggest declines are projected at the middle school and the high school as the existing smaller elementary cohorts rise through the system. So with that, I thank you for your patience. I know this was a long presentation, but again, I wanted to give it its due. So I would open it up to questions, or the board president can handle how she would like to do this. Thank you. Sure. Oh, I love the auditorium.
Well, thank you, Dr. Grip. We certainly appreciate that. I've been poring over some of your numbers, but the presentation certainly makes it much clearer and able to formulate questions. Although I do feel a little bit like I've just sat through one of our 6th grade statistical classes, so I might need a minute to unpack that. This is a very opportune time for you to come in because, as I know you've seen some of our recent board meetings, we're considering a reconfiguration of the school. And I just want to make sure that I'm not just, seeing what I wish to see versus what is actually there. But it seems like the biggest swing in both of your scenarios, we're talking, an increase or a decrease. We're talking a swing of 300 to 400 students, roughly. But where I'm trying to get clarification on is if we have our pre-K is declining now, but then projected to increase later on, and our middle school and high school is going to start to decline, but then based on your housing model, 0 to 8 years from now, roughly 8 years from now, that may increase again. So we're thinking one of the proposals is to take our 3rd grade out of the elementary schools, shift it up, and put 4 grades into the middle school where we're going to have more capacity. So again, am I reading into that because that's what I want to see, or is that what the numbers support?
They actually support that. So that was, if you looked at the middle school capacity values, there's definitely going to be an opportunity to move 5th graders up there, for instance, to accommodate them, because you will have over time greater capacity. So, and if you noticed, the 3 PK to 3s don't have the presentation up anymore, but if I recall correctly, the surplus seating was roughly 30 to 50 students per grade level, which isn't that much. So it really wouldn't take much, especially if you change the instruction and add more special ed or small group instruction. That small amount of surplus seating can dissipate very quickly. So yes, you do have an opportunity with the middle school to use that greater surplus to change grade configuration.
Okay, great. And again, am I accurate in saying that the swing, we're not talking 1,000 student swing, we're talking between, 300 and 400?
That's correct.
Somewhere in there, okay. It's not like we're losing, that many kids in the decline. And I also want to, you had mentioned that capacity is not a hard and fast number. I agree, I think that neither are enrollment numbers, in that it doesn't take into other financial pressures, rising costs, mental health costs, number of students that may require mental health services, special education versus regular, general education. So, some of that we have to factor in as a board in conjunction with a lot of your numbers. But I'd like to pause and give some of the other board members an opportunity to ask some questions and crunch some numbers with you. Anybody else have any questions? I have a few more notes here. No, what do you think? So, Dr. Grip, from your presentation and the housing turnover, I focus on, although you said don't focus on it too much, I did focus, I apologize. So historically, I saw your last presentation, and I've looked at, this report, obviously, the previous report, and historically over the last, 50 some odd years. Is it accurate to say that, generally speaking, when you have a high house turnover, that 0 to 8 years later, you can anticipate some increase in school-age children?
Yeah, I think so. You have to look at, it's hard to say that without looking at all the data, because you really
Sure.
have to also look at the other part of the distribution, those long-held homes. The way you get enrollment increase with housing turnover is you got to get more homes sold in the homes that don't have kids. It's fairly simple math.
Right.
If you can get the homes, say, from 15 years of ownership up to 30 years of ownership, if you keep selling them, get them down to 0 years of ownership where most of the kids are, that's how you get enrollment increase.
Okay.
But if you don't have enough selling going on in those, then you're going to have people continue owning homes that don't have kids.
Okay. And I just want to, the township and the borough you mentioned, they're both doing housing development, and they're fairly far down the track on those. So I do believe that those will take place. And the municipalities have done a fantastic job of, it's a very complex problem, the affordable housing, the development. So, I think they've done a great job with whatever the number is. But I think you said that there was roughly 95 public school children that we should see as a result of the development in both the townships. So does that negate the 300 to 400, or is that part of it?
So there's two enrollment projections. The baseline projection, I think the decline was, I don't have it on me right here, it's somewhere around 400 students, and
Yep.
the one adjusted for housing growth was a loss of about 300 students. So the
Okay.
one that takes into
Okay,
consideration
that is the 95.
is
Okay.
the, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just looking back over my notes here. I wished you had 4 years ago predicted the pandemic. That would have been very helpful in our planning. I won't ding you for that, but I'm just saying that might have been a heads up would have been nice on that one.
For a lot of people.
Yeah, I can imagine it makes your life significantly different. So again, this is super helpful for the board as we discuss the reconfiguration and keep an eye on that negative first grade replacement. One of the goals is to also be able to offer full day kindergarten, and that's how we would use some of that space. So we'd have to double those classrooms and double the staff. So knowing that it's going to decline, and then moving some of the students into the middle school where we have a greater capacity or availability or seats, as you put it.
You can probably get a good estimate of what that would look like for full day K by looking at your first grade counts, because
Right.
I would suspect that it'll be a little lower than your first grade counts. So I think in a district like yours, you'll still get maybe a 5% bump up from K to 1 every year, not because of people going elsewhere, but you just got people moving in.
Right, understood. Oh, yeah, absolutely, Bradley.
The projection of 95, I think it said 95 new students coming from the new development. Were you able to overlay the age of the residents of those new developments? Because I noticed in the bubble demographic chart, there was a much larger proportion of 40 to 50-year-olds than there was 18 to 20 and the 30 to 39-year-old group. Mm-hmm. Could you make the argument that those new developments may have younger people that are younger families looking to have children? Does that demographic shift come into play anywhere?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. You might have people that are younger without children coming in that are, as opposed to someone moving into some other current homes. It's just too hard
Right.
qualitatively to kind of guesstimate that, to
It's
be honest.
arguably a lower price point than new
Right.
developments relative to the $800,000 buy-in.
Correct.
Right.
But here's the thing, with the affordable housing units, so you don't really have too many comparable units in the communities as we speak. There was one or two, maybe about 75 units total, not enough to really base the analysis on. So I used some state averages based upon affordable housing. So to give you an example, a 3-bedroom unit for an apartment would be around 1.08 children for a 3-bedroom apartment, and 2 bedrooms, I think, around 0.6. So, we're using those higher state averages, not what you're seeing for the market rate apartments. I use what your community has, and that's where the most of that 95 is coming from, was the affordable components.
Understood.
Any other questions? Is it unusual that the number of house sales falls in that 1-year column? Is that people just refinancing?
Actually, that's a great question. But the answer is no. When I do a lot of this, a lot of it's the 1-2 years. And it's not refinancing because we only look at valid sales.
Okay.
And we.
Okay, not a flip with the same owner.
Yeah, so if we do a $1 transfer to husband and wife, we throw that out, get the most recent sale and plug it in there. It's a really complex, convoluted, we write in Python and all those other scripts to get it out.
Sure.
But yeah, that's what we do.
And that's not unusual to Chatham, that's
No.
statewide or?
No, it's a little high what I saw for you. Your data was a little higher. I mean, but it's usually up near the top, but yours kind of stood out.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it stood out to me too.
I agree.
Found that unusual.
I totally, yeah.
It's neither here nor there for my enrollment. I was just curious. And I do want you to check your statistics on the educational level between the borough and the township residents. I think I question that a little bit, but you with your master's degree, go ahead.
For that real estate movement, and maybe you can speak to this. I feel like I've lived here a long time, and there's a lot of movement and movement within town. So people selling their home, staying within the township or the borough. So we're keeping those kids, but do you understand what I'm saying? So it's almost like moving cards across the table. Is there any way to track that?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, so we don't really look at the house sales in an individual, to see buyers and sellers and where they go. I mean, we don't get that kind of data individually. Don't know the people that are in them other than the buyer's last name, so we don't have any age data. No, so I don't really have specifics with that.
Thank you.
So you don't have an idea of, people who purchase homes, you don't have an idea of how many kids they're bringing with them below the age of school age?
No, so we don't have any idea, I'll say, by looking at the data that's from housing, but that said, how do I know that you are having a case where people are moving in with families? The survival ratios are telling me that. Because net inward migration into a district where the survival ratios are greater than 1 can really only happen a couple different ways. You can either have a lot of new housing starts, you can have high turnover of people moving in. Those are the things that happen that cause that. So I can't tell you specifically, but I've been around here to tell you long enough that's what's going on.
And just a quick, Michelle, I apologize if this overlaps or even repeats your question. Did you ask Dr. Grip the movement between the borough and the township and the township and the borough?
It's like township, borough,
Okay.
township. I feel like
There's a lot of movement
there's
within.
movement within
We don't like to
our
leave, we just like to move
boundaries.
streets.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
people move up to homes,
Yeah.
or downsize. I mean,
Sure, okay.
I understand that because I'm in the process of selling my home and building on a 6-acre tract. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm just, shifting around. So
Right, excellent. Dr. LaSousa, did you have any questions? I know you've been working with Dr. Grip a little bit more closely. Oh, sure, Mr. Ryan.
In terms of the housing turnover, have you seen cases where, because we're talking about potentially having a full-day kindergarten program, And are there any cases you could point to where housing turnover actually increased in districts that had full-day kindergarten versus what we have as half-day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually just got that question recently from another school district, and I don't know of any real good journal articles, any research articles that actually show that. It just, from my vantage point, I would think that's going to be a draw. But again, the thing that's going to be the real cap on the situation is housing prices. Whether someone really wants to come here because of your full-day K is one thing. Whether they can afford to come here is a secondary item. So I think that the housing prices here are an impediment for a lot of people moving in, but some people do have the means to get here and will do it.
Thank you.
Impediment to me, too. Any other questions from anybody? No? Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Grip. I appreciate you coming back again.
You're welcome.
Hopefully you didn't hit too much weather on your way down with the storm.
Well, no, we had snow yesterday, nothing today. So.
Oh, excellent, excellent, very good. And I understand you went to the River Grill. That's one of our nice restaurants, the pubs that we like to attend.
You should have came by.
I didn't. I found out too late. We would have joined you. So really, thank you. Do you have any questions or comments or suggestions, or other than the auditorium looks great?
No, I think, so I do want to just say, go back to that one chart showing the enrollments broken down by grade configuration over time. Because I try to tell districts that, a lot of people are concerned about a lot of other variables in their communities. It could be housing turnover. It could be, in some communities I work up in Hudson County, they're worried about the change in immigration laws and how that's changing. But a lot of it is inherently built in those patterns that you're seeing historically in those 4 grade configurations over time. They're really hard to change, and particularly with the age structure of the communities, with lower births leading to lower kindergarten, first grade counts, that is really hard to overcome.
Right.
And that is going to drive enrollment, at least in the short term. And we could be talking, if I'm still doing this in 5 or 10 years, I can come back and tell you, we talked about that increase in enrollment, the PK to 3 population. Look what's going on now here in the middle and high school level.
Sure.
But yeah.
And do you, historically, you don't go out beyond 5 years with any, confidence level?
Yeah, the problem becomes then we have to start projecting children who haven't been born yet. So if you think about it, we have 2020 as our most recent birth year. So that gets you your 2025 kindergarten count. So if you want to project out to 2030, we have to project out to 2025 for kids. And I do that. Actually, before I came down here to this afternoon, I was doing that for New York City. That's what we do for them.
Oh, okay.
But that's just a bigger animal.
Sure.
Your sample size is too small to have any kind of reliability.
Okay, great. It's just that we're planning out the next, 5 to 8 years and
Understood.
the reconfiguration. So that's typically I would only be interested 5 years out, but because of the most recent conversations, we want to make sure we have all the information in front of us. But I just thought I'd ask.
But it takes a long time for trends to change. And I try to tell districts that because sometimes they can go through a 10 to 12 years period of declining enrollment before it stabilizes, and then it flips and reverses trends. So it doesn't happen overnight.
Sure. Okay, fantastic. Again, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you for coming out.
Okay.
It's been fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
Safe travels.
Okay, everyone have a nice evening and holiday.
Happy holidays.
Yes, take care.
Thank you very much. Trends in Bell Bottom seem to be coming back. Those happen quickly, quicker than this. So, Dr. Lususa, based on Dr. Grip's information and some that we can extrapolate out, will particularly the middle school crunch some of these numbers in how they look at capacity if we were to move 4 grades into the middle school? Assuming that again, I'm always concerned, pre-K as they move through their cycle and then into middle school and high school. So I was just curious, how will that impact when they look at Genesis and the master schedule?
So to
no?
begin with, I'll say that I stole, plenty from his previous presentation 4 years ago, and some of those numbers are baked in now. So the projections for the middle school a few years out are based on our current students in third grade, second grade, first grade, kindergarten. So the middle school is aware of that, and on a high level, that's how they've kind of estimated how many classrooms they would actually need in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years versus how many they need now when they have so many more students in the school. Their master schedule runs, which the last meeting I mentioned, we were bringing Genesis in to do some training, and that the middle school was going to draft up some master schedules. Those are all based on current students. So what they're doing right now is, and it's primarily Sean Devine and Peter Trebor who are doing this, they're essentially building master schedules for the current 6th and 7th, 8th graders and removing some of the classrooms that are available right now to get to a number where they can see if the parameters were different, how could they more efficiently schedule 6th, 7th, and 8th grade as they stand today? And as they stand today, of course, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade are much larger than 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. So that's what they're kind of working on now, and once they get through a few runs and continue to experiment, and these things take months, like when we build master schedules in the spring, we are talking about a run-up of, 3 months before we get a master schedule done. So that's why there's some time built in here. Once they get a handle on that, though, then they can start tweaking some of the variables and assumptions and looking at what it could look like if instead of trying to schedule 295 kids, you only are scheduling 237.
Got it, okay. Okay,
But all of the principals are aware of high level what we just saw, just because
Sure.
we've been discussing it. This obviously is a much more in-depth and multifaceted presentation. It's much more comprehensive than anything we've talked about.
yeah, I'll probably have to watch it a few more times to really unpack it. I was just thinking in my own head that there's probably not a huge appetite for residents to build new classrooms or add on, trailers for that matter. And if we have our greatest capacity at the middle school, based on part Dr. Grip and just the way we use our buildings, it would make more sense to put 4 grades in the middle school as that bubble goes through, where you have the greater capacity. We've had as many as 1,100 kids, correct, in that building? And I think there's currently 800 or 900. So that gives us our greatest flexibility on the 4 grades. And even if I add the 90, even if the highest swing is 400 with the development, or we, gain 500 or 400 or lose 300, that would still be our greatest area of flexibility to add students, keep the class sizes down without constructing anything else. What be it trailers or, the price of construction has just skyrocketed. And I think the boards 10, 15 years ago did a nice job of positioning ourselves for the bubble, but I think the days of construction are over and we have to work with the capacity that we have. So I think that also will have to play into, 4 grades at the middle school, what's the benefits, what's the downside, and weigh that out, as we get recommendations from the administration. So, okay, so we look forward to that.
Yeah, there's another issue, though, I want to just touch on, because you kind of bring it up, too. One of the problems of building at the K-3 level is that you have to do it well in advance before you know any students are coming.
Right.
So he was just talking about not being able to estimate students who aren't born yet.
Right.
And even those estimates are coming 2 years later, right? The most recent data year he was looking at was 2020. And then it doesn't account for, he mentioned all of the survival ratios being above 1, and
Right.
those are families that move into town. The kids aren't born here. They're not reflected in the birth numbers. It's people who move in and have kids with them. The problem at the K-3 level is that once the kids arrive, it's too late to build.
Right.
Because you can't have a surge in kindergarten or first grade enrollment and then decide you're going to build and you're done in 6 months. It's like at least 2-year process to build. Whereas at the middle school, and true of the high school too, you know that the kids are coming because they enter in first grade, and then they're in second grade the next year. So you have a runway of anywhere from 5 years, let's say, up to 8 if you're looking at the high school. Currently in the district, there are only really 2 places that you can build. the elementary schools are largely built out, including for trailers, and trailers, by the way,
expensive.
are very expensive. They need to be hooked up to an electric,
Right.
run, a feed. You have to run natural gas to them. There's plumbing if you have any sort of needs.
Yeah.
It's expensive, and you typically have a lot of trouble getting rid of the trailer once you bring it in.
Sure.
The two places that we can build are the second floor of one of the wings at the middle school, which did not go, not have an addition put onto it back in 2005, when one of the other wings did. And the board office at the high school, you'll recall, we built it so that we could construct above it if we needed to, thinking that it adjoins basically to the science wing of the school. It's unlikely, based on his presentation, that we will ever need to build at the high school in any of our tenure. We're probably looking 10, 12, 15 years before the possibility could exist that the high
Right.
school would need any additional square footage. The middle school, if we had an increase, as he was predicting, in K3, eventually down the road at some point, and we're probably talking
5
years, 5 to 10
5
years,
to 10.
whatever, that would be at the middle school, and there's a place at least where we could entertain that at the middle school.
And traditionally, you like to keep the class sizes smaller as the grades go lower, and there's some opportunity to increase as the kids are,
Yes.
as, Michelle points out, the kids that are younger they still have to learn to read, and they need a lot of attention. Once they get past the grade, they're reading to learn, and they're a little bit more independent. So, if you had to, I would always want the smallest class sizes at the K to 2, now that if we reconfigure the K to 2s, and then keep them as small as you can until you get to the middle school, high school, where we have more flexibility and capacity in school sizes or classroom sizes. Oh, boy, it's a lot to unpack. Does anybody else have any questions? I know we're going to have to watch that a few more times to really digest it all. Maybe we can get our middle schoolers to unpack some of that for us and summarize it a different way. That's for later. And no additional questions on that? Okay. Dr. LaSousa?
So I have two other items, or one other that's printed anyway, and that is just the mid-year HIB summary, HIB summary. We do a comprehensive report at the end of the year, every year, but we are supposed to do a check-in about this time of the year, December, January, just about the number of investigations and findings at the various grade levels. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Sortino to take care of.
Hello. It works. Okay, so each of the school's anti-bullying specialists were trained, and we all meet as a group periodically throughout the year. They do a fabulous job of working with students who have had some incidents, and also the remediation is really the most important part, meaning like the counseling, follow-up, the support that's provided by the various administrators, et cetera. So at Southern Boulevard School, there were 4 preliminary determination investigations, meaning that something was reported, it did not meet the threshold to open a full-blown investigation, and so the principal, in collaboration with the anti-bullying specialist, determined that it was outside of the scope of HIB, and then it remained at the preliminary determination. That doesn't mean that it's not a code of conduct violation, it just means it did not rise to the level of a HIB investigation. There was 1 HIB investigation at Southern. HIB was not found in that incident. At Washington, there were no preliminary determinations. There were 2 HIB investigations. Both were affirmed. Milton had 1 preliminary determination and no HIB investigations. Lafayette School had 6 preliminary determinations, 1 HIB investigation, and it was affirmed. And CMS had 4 preliminary determinations, 7 HIB investigations, 3 were affirmed, 4 were not. And finally, the high school had 2 preliminary determinations, 5 HIB investigations, 2 were affirmed, 3 were not. And that's the summary of the year so far.
Okay, good.
And then the final item for me, thank you, Dr. Sortino, is just that we welcomed our final Class 3 Special Law Enforcement Officer at Washington Avenue School today. It was his first day, and that means that we have a police officer present at all of our schools now. Ms. Clark reminded me that we're coming up in a couple of days on the 10-year anniversary of Sandy Hook, and prior to that tragedy, we didn't have any security personnel in the district of any kind, not police officer, not district-hired folks. So that was actually the impetus for us to go down the road of employing security. And now we're at a point 10 years later where we have police officer presence. And again, they are specially trained. They're school resource officers. And our police chiefs have done just an absolutely tremendous job of finding talented individuals to fill these roles and then training them and working with them to give us all the support we need. And I know our staff and many of our parents and families are very grateful to have them on board. So want to thank them. And of course, if there's ever a need to report anything, we have an anonymous reporting website and app or link on our homepage of our website. And you can download the app to your cell phone. If you ever need to report anything, that information goes directly to the police departments and is also monitored and, kind of overseen by the county. So just want to thank the police chiefs for all of their hard work in getting us to this point.
That's great, Mike. Thank you. We certainly appreciate the law enforcement. I mean, we hear it in the news all the time, and they just reported that there's over 600 mass shootings, 4 or more in this year alone. So it's good that we have them. It's nice that the kids see the law enforcement. We have an officer here. It's nice that they see them every day and they become part of their environment. And if they have trouble, I just want to remind folks that the special law enforcement officers report to the police chief. They don't really get involved in school business and things like that. They're there for the safety. They're there for, to be a support, but they report to the police chief. They don't report to the principals. So they don't get involved in Dr. Sortino's HIV investigations and things like that. Some people are like, oh my goodness, they're going to be looking for kids to get in trouble. That's not their role, and they do not report to they don't report to Dr. LaSousa, and they don't report to the principal. They are law enforcement officers, and they report to their law enforcement chief. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for your service. Okay, Dr. LaSousa, anything else?
That's it from me.
On your front? Peter, over to you for construction.
Sure, just very briefly, I'm very happy to report that the univents that were a long-awaited delivery for the CHS B wing were delivered, and all have been installed and they are operational. The contractor still has to continue with getting them hooked up to the automated control system, but they continue to work on non-school hours, and we hope to have that done by sometime in January. So unless there's any questions, that's all I have.
No questions for me. No, you're good? I was looking to the finance folks. Great. Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Great. So we're going to move over to committee reports. Ms. Ciccarelli for personnel.
We have not met since our last meeting. We are meeting on January 4th.
January 4th. Excellent. Ms. Clark for curriculum.
Yes, curriculum met on November 30th, and Dr. Donahue gave us an overview on the update on the curriculum for the health and PE and where we stand currently at Chatham Middle School. We are pretty much at the halfway point. Roughly 400 out of 430 students. We've had 5 opt-outs to date. Chatham High School is currently preparing the materials to be shared in the winter and spring semesters when units are being presented to those students, and families will be alerted when that material will come out. Dr. Donahue gave us an update and a recap of the teacher professional development offerings that were on November 9th that teachers engaged in at all levels, pre-K through 12. We also had a lengthy discussion about the current literacy practices in grades K to 3. And we had an overview of the Foundations Phonics material and program. The materials were actually shared with the board, so those of us, I think I'm the only person that has any type of education background, so it was a great way for the other board members to see the materials that students are engaging with on it, each day using Foundations Phonics. And we got a quick synopsis of the rollout, and it will go roll up to grade 2 next year. It's currently in K1, and I'm pre-K too, is it? Or no, yeah, and pre-K. We also got kind of just to see how it's all orchestrated, the phonics instruction, how it's being orchestrated with the reading workshop model and how they complement each other along with assessment models for comprehensive instruction. Dr. Donahue will be working with the K to 3 principals to be in attendance at certain PTO meetings in the near future to meet the community and the targeted audience there. In addition, we had a discussion about the Chatham High School Marching Band and just discussed kind of some creative ways the district is looking at there's a declining participation in the marching band, and this is something we want to see continue. And just looking at ways that we can try to engage this population to look for ways to grow the program. Some of the suggestions were to possibly allow 8th grade students to participate in the high school marching band to kind of pull up the talent and bring them in a little bit sooner, so that we can bolster that program. And that was it. It was a long meeting, but a really productive one.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, it was a great meeting. I realize now how hard it is to teach somebody to read and all of the mechanics involved. Excellent. Any questions for Michelle on any of those items? Nope. Excellent. Mr. Smith, over to you for finance and facilities.
Yes, Finance and Facilities, we met on the 21st of November. We started discussing our $3.6 million capital reserve budget, and Mr. D'Aquila brought up that there is a state allocation of $350 million in funding that goes towards ROD grants, which are for any regular operating district. And you can apply any capital project, and if awarded a ROD grant, they'll provide 40% of the funding back to us. So we compiled a list of kind of all of the capital improvements, including security vestibules, all the roofing construction we've needed done, painting, renovations, univents, and we basically we're going to apply for all of them, and then based on what we are awarded, which is allegedly on a first-come, first-served basis, we can then choose from the different projects what makes the most sense to move forward on. We also continue to talk about the second question, started with some back-of-the-envelope math on what that would look like, any potential ideas and concepts for that second question, and that's still a fluid, ongoing conversation. Dr. Sortino briefed us on the special education update and where we stand in terms of finance and facilities and how we can help there. And then we also continue to speak a little bit about what we can do from a finance standpoint to be more attractive to paraprofessionals, and the fact that we need to continue to recruit and retain paraprofessionals. Oh, finally, one more thing. Mr. D'Aquila gave us a projection for the next 3 years in terms of the budget, and it shows that the revenue continues to be outpaced by even the most modest expense increases. Inflation is a real problem, and we discussed, given that budget estimate, what could be used in a second question to cover those expenses.
Boy, that's not good when your revenue is far below your expenses.
That's not good.
That's a bad business model, as Mr. Gliffelin used to tell us all the time. Excellent. Mr. Ryan, Policy and Planning? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, Michelle.
And I don't know if it's for you, Bradley, or for Peter, but when I look at the agenda and I look at just some of the items that are for, could possibly go out for the ROD grant, the security vestibules at all schools, I would ask the Finance Committee and that if we're not going to pick one over the other, either we're all in or we're all out. Like, I don't want a security vestibule at the high school and not at Southern Boulevard School. So if we can bundle that in a way that we're, I know they're individual buildings, but I think if that is something that is a priority, that can
The
we.
budget that we got, it was for all 6 schools,
Okay,
right? There was
so-
yep.
The resolution is written because
Okay.
the projects have to be applied for by school, by project.
Okay, I
So
just
the
wanted.
district is aware, and I would believe that the finance committee wants to do all 6 of the security vestibules, but according to the state and the ROD grants, there are 6 separate projects.
Got it. Thank you.
But noted.
Thank you.
Excellent. Mike, are you going to do policy or? Okay, great, thanks.
Policy met on November 21st. Couple of agenda items from that meeting. There's a new HIB policy, and based on a regulation that was passed, the state continues to tinker with the HIB law, minor changes here and there. So that's on the agenda for tonight for approval. We discussed also there's also a law that mandates that we have a student representative to the Board of Education. And we talked about how that representative might be selected. The suggestion was that the high school develop some kind of process to screen some candidates that may be interested in that role. International field trips. The committee discussed how and when and where those types of events could be advertised. And the other issue that was discussed was the use of Venmo for various activities, fundraising events. The school system doesn't have a Venmo account, so usually the sponsor of some of those events ends up collecting money.
Right.
And we want to make sure that that's as tight as it can be and put a cap on the amount of money that can be collected by, you know, a teacher, for example, that runs an activity.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the teachers volunteer their time and advisors, and we don't really want to overburden them with, you know, money's in, money's out. I know you're still looking into that, so thank you. Mr. Ryan or Dr. LaSousa or Dr. Sortino, really, are some of the new law, the HIB laws related to the Mallory law, or no, those are not the new changes? It's separate and apart from that. And again, the Mallory law was the online bullying, if you recall, from the student.
Indirectly related.
Indirectly related, okay. Okay. And those are the ones up for reading, or, okay, perfect, thank you.
The major change is in the way that we record the events. There's certain forms and different things that we need to fill out that are given to us by the state.
Okay, so no relief on the criteria, it's just the recording of?
It's process.
Okay,
related,
process
so.
related. Huh, silly me thinking they were going to change something that would be effective. My mistake. Okay, Mr. Ryan, anything else, or?
No, that's it.
We're good,
Next
okay.
meeting's on the 11th.
Very good, thank you. Now we have opportunity for some of the liaisons. I don't know if anybody had anything there. I did on the borough side. Michelle, could you touch on the concert,
Oh, yeah.
if you wouldn't mind?
Last Tuesday, I attended the Chatham High School Choral Concert, which it was amazing, as I feel all our performances are here, but there was a particular moment in the concert that really stood out. Mr. Bryson introduced a student teacher who conducted a piece, and for this young man to get up and show the confidence that he did, and the piece that he presented to the community, and it was when it finished where all the students were cheering for him. And I feel like everyone should get a standing ovation in their life. I'm still waiting for mine, but it just gave me such, as an educator, it's such encouragement to see these young people coming out and the confidence that they have. And I'm extremely proud of Chatham for still committing to have student teachers and interns as part of our school community. Many, many schools across the state right now are not doing it because it's too much work. There are too many loopholes. There's too many things. And we are in a crisis right now. We need teachers. And one way to have teachers is to invite them in. And I don't know where this young man is going to end up, but it will be great. And I do believe it's because he worked with Mr. Bryson. He had the confidence to allow him to conduct this piece. The concert was amazing, so the kids were awesome. Everything was great, but this moment did stand out. And I was really, really proud to be part of a district that is making this a priority. And so I think we can't complain unless we're going to be part of the solution. And this is one way districts can be part of the solution, is to participate in residencies and student teachers and internships. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. How nice he got his standing ovation in the books at the young age of 20. And well-deserved. Excellent. Any other comments? I did have some clarification I wanted to report back to the board. I had reported previously for the last 18 months that we're going to meet with the borough to discuss the payment in lieu of taxes, the acronym for pilot program. But I was happy Mr. Heap is here because I wanted to clarify some of the statements that he made at the last borough meeting. I'm going to hope that they were just, simple misunderstandings, but I do want to clarify some of the items that he mentioned, and I'm glad Mr. Heap is here, as he always is. So one of the pilot is an acronym, and again, payment in lieu of taxes, and I'll get into the history of that a little bit later, but Mr. Heap had commented that, he doesn't believe that the municipality should share the money with the districts, and he said that the school district has its own method of raising money, which is not really true. We can't take out a loan. We can't borrow money without approval. We have a 2% cap, so we can't really just go out and borrow money and raise it ourselves. You know, we can talk about the tuition for kindergarten. That would be one method, but we don't have carte blanche. The state caps us at 2%. You know, and municipalities operate under a different budget where they can bond or take out loans. The school district, I like this one. Mr. Heap said the school district gets all the money they ask for. I wish that were true. We have a 2% cap. We could go out to second questions. They may or may not pass, but if we got all the money we asked for, I believe Bradley would come up with the number to pay, you know, teachers more, pay paras more, so we didn't lose, you know, lose staff. He would, if he had this magic wand to get whatever we asked for, you know, we wouldn't be struggling with the budget as we do year over year and the projections that Peter had for the next 3 years out. The next statement was the school district has a way to participate and get money from the new housing. Again, the 2% budget, the way the school district's budgets work is we get 2% of the previous year. I don't care if there's 1 million houses built and they're assessed at $2 million apiece. The school district does not get a dime of that. They don't get it the following year. They don't get it 10 years from now. Our budget is 2% of the previous year, and that's done intentionally. If every house lost its value, the school will still get its money. So that's the plus side to it. Maybe the downside is we do not realize any of the money from, you know, appraises going up or additional housing. We have to assume any students that come on board or any expenses incurred, but we have a 2% cap, that's it, 2% of the previous year. We don't see a dime of the increase from the housing. And one of the final statements is Mr. Heap said that the per student price here in Chatham is $20,000 when it's actually about closer to $15,000. And, you know, that's typically the number that we use on charts. So I just wanted to clarify that. And Bill, you had said that the conversations are coming out of hibernation, but we've been talking about them pretty much at every meeting. We met with the borough council members about 18 months ago, and certainly a lot happened between COVID and affordable housing. They've been very busy, but we've been talking about it all along. And you had said the school has an insatiable appetite for money. Well, that's because we have an insatiable expenses. Again, as Bradley just pointed out, we have a 2% cap, and our expenses exceed 10%. I mean, 75% of our expenses in any school district are salaries and benefits, salary and health benefits. And if you have a 2% cap and your health benefits go north of 10%, obviously that math doesn't work and the money has to come from somewhere. And then this is the most important point, Mr. Heap. You had said, I'm not sure why the borough is even talking about this. I don't know why they would share the money with the schools at all. So where I want to spend the most of my time is clearing up that and just reviewing why we are actually having these discussions. So over the last several years, the borough has been working extremely hard in very, very challenging circumstances to meet the town's affordable housing obligation. And they don't have carte blanche. They're working with the fair share housing, they're working with the court system, they're working obviously with the residents, and they're working within the regulations. So it's not an easy task. And again, I can't imagine why anybody would want that volunteer job, but God bless them that they do it for us. So they decided, with all of meeting with their experts and meeting with legal and meeting with their budget folks and countless hours of crunching the numbers, the borough council decided that entering into a contract with a developer to build 259 units on River Road was in the best interest of Chatham Borough. I don't question that at all because they put in the time, they're the experts in that field, and that's their responsibility. They chose to go into an arrangement that's called a pilot, and it stands for payment in lieu of taxes. And I handed out the board the chart that is on the borough website that outlines, you know, it was an analysis that they did, and this is on the borough website, you know, the benefits to going with a pilot versus straight property taxes. And again, they probably spent hundreds and hundreds of hours on that analysis, and I appreciate their time and effort in that. And they also held, if you recall, a lot of town halls, and they discussed it at a lot of borough meetings, and they put up presentation. They had experts come in. They gave residents ample opportunity to discuss some of the permutations and the options, and every time that they talked about 259 units, what are you kidding me? How's that going to impact the school? Many, many residents said, how's that going to impact? And time again, the borough council had told the residents, and they promised them that they would, based on this model, that they would not negatively impact the school district and that they would work with the school district and share some of that payment in lieu of taxes. It can come in many forms, and that still has to be discussed, but one of the ways to fulfill that promise to the residents that the borough made is to, share to offset some of the expenses that might be incurred. The one thing that Mr. Heap did say that I agree with was, we don't know what the expenses are going to be until we know it. That property will not be fully subscribed or fully rented out, probably for 2 years out, maybe more. I'd have to ask, Carolyn Dempsey is the board liaison, and I usually run my questions by her. So that's the reason that we're entering into these conversations, because as we talk about full-day kindergarten, as we talk about losing mental health money, that is one small factor in our budget. So that's what we've been trying, to meet with the Borough Council so that we can factor these numbers in. And again, it's a very small piece of a much larger budget. And we have run into some challenges with scheduling with the borough. But Councilwoman Dempsey assured me, in fact, just this afternoon, she assured me that they still plan on meeting with us, but they needed to meet with professionals again because they have new information, new numbers they need to crunch as it relates to the reevaluation that's going on in the borough. So we were supposed to have met, we had a couple of dates, so by this meeting I would have been reporting back differently, but I'm reporting back that we haven't met yet. But again, I did want to clarify, why we're entering into these discussions and what was decided, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago when the residents raised their hand and said, wait a minute, if you build 259 units, oh my goodness, how is that going to impact the schools? So I don't, that Mr. Heap said it's unseemly. It's unseemly that the board would even come with their hand out. But, our role at this table, we have a responsibility and an obligation, in fact, to provide the best education. And I certainly hope we're going to provide even a better education than my kids had, and 10 years from now, than the kids are in the school. So part of that is to work with the borough and work with our municipalities, and that was the agreement when they entered into a contract with the developer. And I just wanted to give you an idea, of the chart, year 1, but down to year 30, it's after a 30-year contract, it's $49 million. Again, we haven't worked out any details of what that means, but that's the reason that we're having these discussions, because it is a payment to the borough in lieu of taxes. So again, so while I'll report back, there's no indication that the council's, is going back on that promise that they made to residents that it wouldn't impact the school district. In fact, Councilwoman Dempsey said that that's not the circumstance and that they are definitely going to meet with us. And I certainly hope that we're going to be able to meet, hopefully it's getting a little bit late in the year, but maybe very early next year. We'll meet, and I'll keep asking Carolyn, and you can keep asking, Steve, the administrator, but, that is the reason, that's the history, that's the goal, and it's just one piece in our puzzle. But as we're trying to figure out these things, we have to plan 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years out. So again, I don't think they have an easy job. I appreciate the municipalities with all the work that they do, and, nobody volunteers to do a bad job. So, if you think, oh my goodness, you're crazy, you built X amount of units, why did you agree to that? It is so complex that, you can't second guess the folks that have been sitting in the room for hundreds of hours making these decisions, working with all kinds of legal regulations and different entities that they're obligated to fulfill. So I appreciate the municipality's efforts. I do hope that I can report at the first meeting in January that we've had a meeting and that we're moving forward. Certainly the members of the borough board will be sitting in on those meetings. And if you could just hang on to your chart, again, that's on the borough website. So I know that was a long-winded, but I just wanted to clarify some of the statements. And again, 2% is 2% is 2%. We can't make up our own money. We don't have a pot of gold, don't have a printing press in the basement. We only get 2% of the previous year's budget. And unfortunately, year over year, our expenses exceed that. So we always have to figure out how we're going to do that, whether it's a second question or more creative. Even with declining enrollment, there's other financial pressures that I mentioned earlier. It's just not a one-for-one. It's a very complex, I'm kind of stepping in Bradley's space here. So I'm going to beg off and, let the finance committee do their thing and present to the board, when they know the numbers. But hopefully by early January, we'll have something that you could feed into that puzzle. So sorry about the long wind. I just wanted to provide history. Does anybody have any questions? Some of the folks are newer on the board, so I don't know if that made sense or if you had any questions on any of that.
first
Could
time
you-
seeing this.
oh.
Does it make sense to like explain which column is which? I kind of got some of the relationships, but like.
You know what, other than the red box, and I don't want to get too into it because it's not my document, right? This is the Borough Council document, and it's dated. This is when they were doing their analysis and explaining to residents, and I thought it was fairly clear, but the comparison is left to right. The left side is the payments that they would receive entering into this development with, into a contract with the developer versus if they just stayed with the traditional tax, property tax model. Again, I don't want to talk too much of it because one, I don't own and it's on the borough website. I just want it, the folks to know that we're looking to, the school district's goal, as I told Councilwoman Dempsey, is we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the expenses are going to. We're just hoping to share in a percentage of this. And I think it's unrealistic to think, oh, you know what, the municipalities always say, well, the school district gets over 60% of your property taxes go to the school district. Well, they didn't count on that. We're not looking for 60%, but we're looking for some percentage. So I don't know what the new numbers are going to be if they change. They may go down. They may go up with the reevaluation, but we're not looking for a number necessarily. And Mr. Ryan and Ann, right, you were at the last meeting. I wasn't able to attend, but it's more of a percentage of a payment to help offset some of the costs. Again, without a crystal ball, I don't know what the costs are going to be 4 years down the road for the student in apartment 2A. So, these are just initial discussions and conversations with the borough based on what they've said for years. We're entering into this eyes wide open. We know there's going to be some impact to the schools. We're going to ensure that it's not going to be negatively impacted by what they do. So that's where we're at in that dialogue. Good luck, Bradley, with the budget. Excellent. Okay, very good. So that's it for any other liaisons? Oh, very good. Thank you, Susan.
Can you hear me? Okay, great. CF closed out their first grant cycle of the year, which funding of $17,000 was provided to teachers and administrators, and it benefited programs that we have discussed tonight, the first being the District Choral Festival for Lafayette, the middle school, and the high school choruses, and they're going to also be initiating a new requiem study for some of the high school orchestra and choral students. And then the balance of the grants also went to teachers in the K-3 schools to support math, fact fluency, and a lot of the reading strategies that we had mentioned this evening for the younger learners. CF's next grant cycle will close in January, so we look forward to hearing about that, and we thank you for the support as usual. And finally, there is a great family-friendly holiday event called the Winter Wonderland that was postponed. It was supposed to be last Saturday, but it moves to this Saturday, December 17th from 5 to 8 p.m. And that's it. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Susan. Any questions for anybody else on those liaison reports or anything else that came up? No? Excellent. Okay, then great. I'm making a motion to pass the minutes, both the public session and the executive session of the November 7th meeting. And I believe, Michelle, you're the only one absent? Okay, great. All those in favor of the passing the November 7th public and executive session? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Duly noted, passes 7-0-1 with Mrs. Chigarelli as the second.
Excellent, thank you. So we have our first opportunity for public commentary. Hearing of the citizens during public commentary section of the agenda is an opportunity for any member of the public to be heard about issues which are or not topics scheduled for the current meeting. To help facilitate an orderly meeting and to permit all to be heard, speakers will be asked to limit their comments to a reasonable amount of time. And again, just a reminder, this is your opportunity to make comments. This is not a back and forth Q&A. If we can answer something quickly, we will after we close the commentary, but we're not going to, get into a back and forth. So the time is yours. Thank you. If you could introduce yourselves and sign in, that would be swell.
My name is Betsy Long, and I am a biology teacher at the high school and co-president of the Chatham Education Association. On behalf of Chatham Education Association, we want to wish a happy holidays, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and wonderful New Year to all of the families who make us grateful for our partners in the school district of the Chathams. I wanted to take a moment tonight to talk about one of our special elves in the Chatham Education Association, Candy Hull, an extraordinary art teacher here at the high school, someone who teaches all of us how to grow our hearts 3 sizes larger. Candy is our Pride and Fast chairperson, and she personally brings $40,000 of grant money to the Chatham area every year. The CEA, we've paid this in dues with additional matches from the NJEA. She's recently been recognized by Sean Spiller, NJEA president, and Phil Murphy as one of the highest performing grant writers in the entire program. In addition to senior dinners that we are all familiar with, this year Candy has expanded our Pride and Fast program to include little libraries going in outside of SBS, Washington Avenue and Milton Avenue, with grants from Read Across America. She's funding tote bags for the Homeless Solutions clients, our homeless outreach here at CHS, and pillowcases for the Morristown Pediatric Unit with Smiles for Miles. And we invite the community to match us in our food drives this winter and spring. And I invite anybody who is impressed by Candy's amazing efforts to say a big thank you to her for her constant, unwavering work of goodwill on behalf of CEA in our Chatham and Morris County community. Thank you, Candy, for being an inspiration to me and to our community at large.
Hi, my name is Laura Noonan. I teach 3rd grade at Southern Boulevard School, and I am co-president of the Chatham Education Association. Just wanted to mention one other thing. Over the weekend, Jess Liadis and James Hitching and the CMS robotics team competed in their first LEGO League Mid-Atlantic Regional Championships, which is a 2-day event. The team earned an invitation to this event by placing in the top 8 teams of the New Jersey North First Qualifiers Tournament in November. This championship was the culmination of many months of hard work. The team developed an innovation research project, built and coded a robot, and most of all, had a ton of fun. Although the team did not advance, they were one of the 2 teams to earn the Motivate Award. This award celebrates a team that embraces the culture of First LEGO League through team building, team spirit, and displayed enthusiasm. Congratulations to Cougar Nation team number 34043. And one last big thank you and shout out to Suzanne Bass and some of the CMS orchestra members for the wonderful holiday music we had before the meeting this evening. Thank you.
Libby Hilsenrath, Chatham Borough. I just had a couple of questions, and one was going to be actually about the policy on HIB. It wasn't in the attachment, but I appreciate the conversation that was had about what the changes were. That was really helpful because I wasn't sure what the differences were. So thank you for that. My second question is about the architect firm and the projects that are listed. Is that per our contract with them? Pret Samjan, I guess it is. Is it a term contract we have? When did that contract start, and what are the terms, or can I find those on the website somewhere? And then the third question is on section B, I guess, number 13, a settlement agreement. Are these settlement agreement terms listed in the executive session minutes that are obtainable through Oprah requests, or how do we find out what those terms of settlement are? Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Sharon Roche, Chatham Borough. Couple of things. I really appreciated Mr. Grip's presentation on the demographics and kind of where we're projected to go. Anecdotally, I'm a maternity nurse, so spending a lot of time around where all the babies are born. And so I was a little bit bummed that the cutoff was 2020, because I feel like for us, I respect that we have a 5-year, window that we're looking at to project ahead. But I'll just say that we're seeing record numbers this past year. So I'm really interested to see how we are projecting forward. So just putting that out there. And then, of course, I just want to mention again, when we're talking about the redistribution of students, 3rd grade to Lafayette, 5th grade to middle school. Obviously, I agree that our school does need a full day kindergarten, but I am so concerned about our current 3rd graders who had the half-day kindergarten and their mental health and their social development going forward. And I just want to ask again to please delay pushing them up to middle school and having them miss their 5th grade year at Lafayette. I just feel like it's so important for them to have those 2 years at Lafayette for their development and especially for their mental health. They've gone through so much in their elementary period with this pandemic. So I just want to ask again to please delay that to at least September 25. Thanks so much.
Good evening, Bill Heap. First, I'm going to put on my JC hat and let everybody know that our Christmas tree sale is in full swing. So please stop by and pick up your tree while they last. And I would like to point out that even the JCs have a Venmo account. How about that? So you can pay cash, check, or Venmo. Okay. A rebuttal to Mrs. Weber's rebuttal to my comments at the council meeting. I'm trying to figure out a way that we can maybe get this done, and I'm thinking maybe a giant mud wrestling pit on stage where we charge admission to settle this. I will stand behind my comments at the board meeting. I do think you get what you ask for. That's the way the system works. Do you get all you ask for? Yes, you do. Would you wish for more? Of course. Doesn't everybody wish for more? As far as taking advantage of the new housing developments going up, no, you don't participate in any increase in ratables that might occur. That is not the way the system works. What I said was that you had an opportunity to take part in that through the back door. I don't understand the politics of kindergarten. I never did. New Jersey mandates just about everything. They do not mandate kindergarten, and this is your opportunity. This is a revenue opportunity for you. If you're going to ask for money, especially the borough, it seems to me that you should be exploring all the opportunities that are available to you first. So the idea that you can charge a pretty good tuition is, I think you have a willing clientele, and you have a clientele that is in a position to pay. So you might as well charge them. This is like walking in the back door of these new homes. You grab them by the ankles, turn them upside down, and shake them until the money comes out. That's the way to do it. As far as the cost per student goes, I'm a simple guy. I take the budget and I divide it by the number of students. That comes out, I think, to about 20,000. There is an $80 million budget divided by 4,000 students, more or less. I don't know, and I think as the student population goes down, the denominator goes down, the numerator stays the same, the cost per pupil is going to go up, if anything. And going forward, I also said in my remarks that you are going to have to start budgeting and managing for declining enrollment. This is not easy. I don't wish that on anyone. Student population going down, and you have budgetary pressures just like everybody else does. The town is facing those pressures. I don't know why your problems should become their problems or their problems should become your problems. That is I think the gist of what I am saying. They have issues to deal with as well. They just announced a 20% increase in healthcare costs. Okay, everybody's facing that. We have a volunteer fire department that's an elephant in the room. These are all going to be putting pressure on the town. Nobody is happy about the developments. These developments were forced down our throats, whether we liked it or not, and we all have to deal with it. So I don't know if you would like to engage in that mud wrestling contest or not, but I'm open if you are. Good night, and Merry Christmas to everybody.
Okay, great, thanks. I'll try and address those items. And Libby, if you don't mind waiting until the second public commentary, I appreciate it. We can get through this very quickly. Thank you, Betsy and Laura, for coming out. I know you have had a long day. Thank you for highlighting all the great things going on. Love to see you guys out here. Mrs. Hilsenrath, I'm going to have to send some of your questions over to probably Peter, but I believe the architect, don't we re-up the contracts annually at the reorg meeting?
Yes, the
In
architect's
January?
contract is renewed at every reorg meeting in April, and this will be part of the contract that the district has with him. To follow your other question, the information on settlement agreements is not available to the public. It's a private document between the district and the parents of the student on the settlement.
Great, thanks, Peter. I knew the contracts were annually. I just thought they were January. I didn't realize they were April. I think 10 years later, I'd pick up on that. Thank you, Sharon, for coming out. I appreciate that. Appreciate your comments on, school and the third grade. And as you heard from Dr. LaSousa, no decisions have been made. They're still crunching the numbers. We have no idea if the recommendation is going to be 2024, 2025, 2026. So, more to follow. And I think, Mike, you had said you really wouldn't have anything to share with the board until sometime into the new year. I don't know if it's first quarter or second quarter, but I know it's sometime in our, medium future. So you may get your wish, you may not get your wish, I don't know. We'll see. You'll hear it when we hear it. Although I do have to say, personally, having 3 kids through the district, in some ways, while I hear what you're saying about the 5th graders in Lafayette, I also look forward to the 5th graders taking advantage of the state-of-the-art labs that are at the middle school. I think in part we hold them back a little bit because the facilities were designed for some of the younger grades. And I get some of the social interactions that you talk about, but it also excites me that the 5th graders get to use that state-of-the-art equipment. I don't know if you've been to the middle school. I recommend you take a tour when it's possible. You can't just tour the schools, but if it's ever possible, some of those labs are just, I'm telling you, state-of-the-art, better than some colleges have, which is super nice to expose our kids to that kind of curriculum and help them maybe design a career path going forward. So there are some advantages. Mr. Heap, thank you for your rebuttal to my rebuttal from your rebuttal. So I appreciate it. I'm going to let the whole mud wrestling comment go to the side. I'll talk to you at the produce aisle on that. So thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. I'll leave Mr. Bradley to handle the budget presentation, and you can talk about per cost numbers or per pupil numbers. So I know you're always at that meeting, so we can hash some of the numbers a little bit further down the road on that. So again, I appreciate you coming every meeting, and I appreciate your comments. So thank you. Okay, great. So we're going to move over to the regular agenda. Again, these are posted on Friday, so if it appears that we go through them fairly quickly, we've already read them. So without further ado, I'm going to send this right over to personnel for Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes, I'd like to move agenda items A1 to A19 on the regular agenda, and then items 1, 4, 9, 15, 17, and 20 to 23 on the addendum.
Excellent. Second. Are you going to remind us?
Please note that item A6 on the paper copies the board has, it was updated since the published copies due to a slight change. And on items A18, Ms. Weber, Ms. Ciccarelli, and Mr. Del Sandro need to abstain.
Okay, great, thank you. Perfect. Any additional questions? Did somebody second that yet?
Mr. Ryan
Oh,
did.
thank you, Mr. Ryan. I apologize. Great. Any additional questions? And we're abstaining because our children are on the substitute list. As I've been begging folks to please get your kids signed up, I continue to beg in-laws, children, grandchildren, anybody of age, please get them to sign up to be substitutes. And if you have any paras hiding in your households, please get them. We're short of paras, so please, 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 please. You see all those signs. Beth Grant moves those signs all around town. It's always like, where's Waldo? Oh, the sign showed up at Shumpike Park today. So again, if you can, if you have anybody that is interested in a substitute or a paraprofessional position, please have them contact Ms. Grant or just go on the website and apply through AppleTrack there. It's my plug for the night again. If no other questions, Peter, would you mind?
Sure, agenda items A1 through 19, addenda items 1, 4, 9, 15, 17, 20 to 23, with the adjustment made to A6. Ms. Chigarelli.
Yes to all items except abstain on 18.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro.
Yes, except for agenda item number 18. I
Thank you.
abstain.
Ms. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Dr. Zhang.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Abstain on 18 and yes for the rest of the items.
All the agenda items, with the exception of A18, pass 8-0. A18 passes 5-0-3.
Excellent, great. Over to you, Mr. Smith, for finance and facilities.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to move agenda items B1 to B13 to a vote. I also, in addition to the CEF grants that Ms. Ross mentioned, we also have a donation from the Chatham High School Athletic Booster Club for use for the licensing fee for the state. We have a donation to the Chatham Middle School from Miss Suzanne Perkins of an oboe, and a donation to Lafayette Avenue School of 23 acoustic panels that are surprisingly valued at $10,000+. So thank you for all of those donations.
That's fantastic, thank you. Bradley, it's not on the agenda, but when can we expect some of the preliminary budget meetings, the public ones? Do you have a sense? Is that generally February, March?
February, March, right?
March, April.
March, April, I'm sorry. Again, 10 years later, you think I'd remember that. So March, April is when the budget will start to flesh out, and for those in the audience, you know.
I will just mention, after the rebuttal to the rebuttal to the rebuttal, and one more rebuttal, that we have been managing through and budgeting through an enrollment decline. So Mr. Heap might recall a couple of years ago the fact that we were reducing a library and media center specialist at the K-3 level received some attention. And I pointed out that that reduction followed about 5 consecutive years of reductions, even at that time, of teaching staff at the K-5 level. And just a year ago, we eliminated an administrative position from Lafayette Avenue School, also because of declining enrollment, at least in part. So one of the reasons we have been able to maintain a budget within the 2% tax levy cap all the way up until this point has been that we've been reducing staff where there are fewer children. We have been adding staff as the bubble has gone through the snake towards the upper grade levels. But number of children is not the only variable that drives our needs and our costs. So whether we like it or not, we do inherit issues that emanate from outside of the school district, including those when folks move in with students with very, very significant needs who can't even attend our schools and need to be placed in an out-of-district placement, or mental health related needs that we've seen emerge or at least be exacerbated over the last few years, and other challenges that may or may not have anything to do with the school district. So we can't just base our budget or a dollar amount that we spend per pupil, whichever one you choose. There are 10 different per pupil expenditure figures that you can take from the Department of Education. You can't just base that on the number of children in the school district. You have to also base it on the needs of the particular children that are in the school district. And we know that we have more needs now, or our children have more needs now, than they've ever had before, at least in terms of the types of special education services, and I'm including in that term all of the mental health-related support that they currently need. That is a gigantic driver in our budget process. It was a year ago, and it was the cause of the reduction of staff last year alongside the declining enrollment, particularly at the lower grades. Just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you, Mike. You just wanted to get in on the rebuttal. But thank you for the clarification. That does help, and it definitely lends more context to the budget conversations and per pupils and all these numbers that we all throw out, continuously. So thank you for the clarification. Transportation costs. Right. And if the River Road projects, gets, wherever it goes, it likely will need transportation. Whether there's one student or 95 students, they will require busing, as there's really no sidewalks or safe way at current time. That doesn't mean it's not going to change. Excellent. Any additional questions? Dr. Donahue, did you want an opportunity to get in on the rebuttal? You're going to pass on the rebuttal. I don't blame you one bit. Okay, fantastic. If there's no additional budget questions, Peter, would you
Sure.
mind?
I just want to note that on the CEF donation, I did get notified prior to the meeting that the musical exploration grant was increased, so I'll adjust the totals in the minutes.
Oh, great.
It was increased by $367.
Fantastic.
For Mr. Bryson.
Great news.
So agenda items B1 through B13, Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro. Yes. Ms. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Dr. Zhang.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Excellent. Over to you, Ms. Ciccarelli, for curriculum items. Oh,
Clark.
oh, sorry.
Curriculum items C1 through 4 on the regular agenda. Very happy to see an intern listed from Montclair State to Washington Avenue for the spring.
I'll second it.
Dr. Donahue, do you anticipate being able to increase our interns and student teaching? Or I know there's a lot that goes along with it, and it's very consuming for our staff to take on interns. So I was just wondering if you can maybe touch on that a little bit.
We have been in contact with Fairleigh and Drew to see if there's anything we can do. It is complicated, but I do think that, as Michelle and I can appreciate from teaching, there was a time where people did not look favorably upon having student teachers. They were rather territorial in their classrooms. But I think teachers across the board recognize that the need, it's at a critical point right now, and anything that we can do to recruit teachers in, you really do need a full year to even begin to dip your toe in the water of what it means to be a teacher, and I think the teachers in Chatham are receptive to that. It's just a matter of finding the right recruits who are well-trained and really could, turnkey what they've learned in their programs, and then take what they could learn from the Chatham teachers who are obviously masters at what they do. But it is a tricky process.
Sure. Yeah, I was just thinking from a recruitment point of view, is there a way to, enhance that? I know it's...
We'll be out shopping around in the
Okay.
spring, making sure that various schools know that we have openings,
Okay.
and making sure that Chatham is top of mind as they go to search for jobs.
Perfect. Okay,
So-
fantastic. Great. Thank you.
Yep.
I appreciate that clarification. Does anybody else have any questions for Michelle or Dr. Donahue or Dr. LaSousa? No? Excellent. Peter, back to you.
Agenda items C1 through C4, Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Del Sandro.
Yes.
Ms. Ross.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Dr. Zhang.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items pass 8-0.
Excellent. Over to you, Mr. Ryan, for policy.
Yes, I'd like to move action item D1 on the regular agenda for a vote.
Second.
On the agenda. It says none next to policy.
Oh,
But then
sorry.
followed by the item. Mr. Ryan, I forgot to ask earlier, on the rewrite or the review of all of our policies from the school board?
This is part of that
That's part of
process.
that.
This is
Do
the
you know
first
when
one.
we might get the rest back? Is it still January, February? I mean, do you have a harder timeline or nothing?
We haven't been given a
Okay.
timeline yet.
Okay.
Maybe Dr. LaSusa can expand on that.
I spoke with the school board's rep a week or two ago, and they're still working on it, still making progress, hoping early new year to be done.
Okay, great.
Or at least be at the next step where they can go through all of their updates, recommendations, stuff that was outdated, new citations, et cetera. et
They're
cetera.
mapping,
Okay.
we're in a mapping process.
And Mike, Mike Ryan, is it your expectation that policy will go through that mapping exercise and then come to the board on recommendations on what to adopt, what to reject, what to modify?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, great, thanks. So we look forward to that. Okay, any additional questions on any of the policy matters? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? There you go, Peter.
Duly noted, agenda item D1 passes 8-0.
Okay, great. So we're now at the portion of the agenda, which is board business. I know we talked a lot about a lot of things throughout, so does anybody else have anything additional that they would like, or anything else they'd want to talk more about or clarify? Any more rebuttals?
I mean, one thing I would say is whether the state of New Jersey requires kindergarten, the town of Chatham expects kindergarten. And the education changes, things change over time, and I do believe that this town is ready for full-day kindergarten. The expectation is there. I think people spend a lot of money to buy a house to live here, much more than I did when I originally moved here 20-plus years ago. And I have a very hard time charging anyone for a full-day kindergarten program based on the taxes that they're paying. And I think the expectation, regardless of what the state is requiring.
Okay, excellent. Any other board business or any comments about anything before this is our wrap meeting of the year, calendar year, not school year. Mike always corrects me that it's halfway through the year, not the end of the year. No additional comments? Excellent. Okay, great. So we have our second opportunity for public commentary. Again, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself and
Libby Hills and Rath, Chatham Borough. I just sort of wanted to follow up on Bill Heap's comments and I guess the discussion that's been going on about budgets and 2% caps and all that and inflation costs. We are all dealing with inflation as families. We are all dealing with increased costs, not just the school district, not just Chatham Borough Council, not just Chatham Township. So I would just say to be cognizant of that in comments. We all have to manage our income and expenses, and we don't necessarily get an automatic 2% increase in our salaries. So that's just a comment. And the second thing I just happened to be reading, and I think it's sort of pertinent to what we've been talking about, it's a chart from the shows the percentage of growth population in public schools from 2009 to 2019, and the source is the Center for Education Statistics from the U.S. Department of Education. So what it shows is that the percentage of student increase was 7.6, the percentage of teacher increases was 8.7, and the percentage of district administrators was 87.6%. I was wondering if we have any of those statistics about the Chatham School District. Perhaps our demographer does. Perhaps it could be provided at a future meeting to see. So this, again, the chart compares the percentage of students increased, teachers increased, and district administration. Thank you.
Back again for more rebuttals to rebuttals. I want to make it clear to Ms. Clark, I'm not against full-day kindergarten, but it is a revenue opportunity for the district. And the fact is that that kindergarten, I guess, is not mandated by the state. I don't get that. They could get it done if they wanted to, but they don't. And so the idea that you would go to the town or the borough before maximizing your own revenue opportunities doesn't make sense to me. And full-day kindergarten at $10,000 is a bargain when you think about the fact that people are paying $35 or $40 over at Kent Place or at Pingree or any of the other private schools. It certainly makes sense for us to try and maximize that revenue, especially when you need the money. Thanks. One more thing. What I suggested to the town was, the borough, there be some kind of quid pro quo. If the borough is going to hand over pilot money, I don't think that they should be handing out taxpayer money without getting something in return. And one of those things I suggested was that there be a very strong suggestion that you do, in fact, charge for kindergarten. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Great, no other public commentary? Great, fantastic. Just a reminder, we have an executive session after this. I think it'll be fairly brief. This is our last meeting of the year, and our next meeting back is early January 7th. But I just want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Thank you for coming out. Please drive safe, and action will be taken at the executive session. And again, I don't anticipate it being too long. Oh, thank you again to the tech team. Thank you, everybody. That's fantastic. Thanks, guys. And we're a wrap. Thank you.